The rain had been falling since morning, turning the streets into shiny rivers of reflection. The market square was almost empty now, except for a few people hurrying under umbrellas. Near the edge of the square stood an old, broken piano, forgotten by everyone. Its wooden frame was cracked, the paint had peeled off, and one of its legs leaned awkwardly on a brick to keep it standing. Most people never even noticed it anymore. It had become part of the background, just another piece of junk waiting for time to finish it. But one little girl stopped that afternoon. Her name was Lena, a thin girl with messy hair tied into a ribbon that had already lost its color. She carried a small school bag, her socks soaked from walking through puddles. She was supposed to go home straight after class, but something about that piano caught her attention. The way the rain tapped on its wooden surface sounded like it was whispering secrets. She stepped closer, her shoes making soft splashes on the ground. Lena's mother used to tell her that music could talk even when words couldn't. Her mother had played piano once. Long ago, before she got sick, Lena remembered lying on the couch listening to her mother's soft songs filling their small apartment. The music always made her feel safe. But after her mother was taken to the hospital, the piano at home was sold to pay bills. Since then, silence had lived with them. Now standing before this abandoned piano, Lena felt something move inside her heart. She raised her hand and brushed away the water collecting on the keys. Her reflection looked back at her in the glossy black wood. She smiled a little, shy but curious. Slowly, she pressed one key. The sound that came out was rough and broken, like an old voice trying to remember how to speak. She laughed quietly, then tried another key. Each sound was imperfect, yet the notes blended softly with the rain. She played random tones, not a real song, but the rhythm felt right. Drops of water fell from her hair as she leaned closer, trying to match the sound to the memory of her mother's lullaby. Her small fingers were cold and pink, but she didn't stop. For the first time in months, she felt alive. People began to notice. A man selling roasted corn nearby looked up, confused at first. A woman waiting for the bus turned her head to see where the sound was coming from. They saw the soaked little girl sitting on a broken bench, playing the ruined piano like it was something holy. The man frowned, thinking she might ruin the keys, but then he saw her smile, and something inside him softened. The rain grew heavier, yet Lena didn't move. Her bag slipped from her shoulder and landed in a puddle, but she didn't care. The world around her disappeared, only the sound of rain and music remained. It was strange and beautiful, like hope had found a melody again. After a while she stopped, breathing fast. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from excitement. She wiped her forehead with her sleeve and looked around. A few people were still watching her. Some smiled, others just stood quietly, unsure why they suddenly felt something warm inside their chest. One of them, a teenage boy with a phone, recorded a short video before she noticed. Lena didn't know that her small act of curiosity would soon touch millions. She only knew that the piano had spoken to her, and she had answered back. As she got up to leave, she looked at the piano one last time. "Thank you," she whispered, even though she knew it couldn't hear. But maybe it could. Maybe things that are forgotten still listen, still wait for someone to remember them. The wind blew, carrying the faint tune across the square. The corn seller turned off his stove. Still thinking about that sound, the woman missed her bus without realizing it, and the boy who recorded the video didn't delete it. He uploaded it that night, calling it "The Little Girl Who Played in the Rain." And while Lena walked home under the fading storm, holding her dripping bag close to her chest, she didn't know that something had already begun. Something small and magical, born from the forgotten street corner, the sound of rain, and a brave little heart that refused to stay silent. The next day, the rain returned, soft and gentle this time. The street still glistened, the puddles still held reflections of passing clouds. Lena walked the same path again, her bag heavier with wet notebooks and her heart strangely lighter. She didn't know why, but something inside her wanted to see the piano again. It was as if it had become her secret friend, one that didn't speak but somehow listened. When she turned the corner, She saw it standing there. The same broken piano with its chipped keys and missing panel. The brick that held one leg was still there, slightly sunk deeper into the mud. The roof above it had leaked even more, but the piano still stood, proud and patient. Lena smiled, wiping her wet bangs from her forehead. She walked closer, her shoes splashing lightly through puddles. She reached out again, tracing her finger across the wooden edge. The coldness didn't bother her. She pressed a few keys, and this time, the sound was clearer. The rain hadn't drowned the music yet. A faint tune filled the air. Shaky, but sweet. She remembered the melody from last time, the one that reminded her of her mother. She began to hum softly, her voice trembling but full of feeling. A man sitting at the nearby bus stop looked up. It was the same vendor who saw her yesterday. He smiled and called out, "Hey, little girl, playing again?" Lena looked over and nodded shyly. "Yes," she said. "It sounds better today." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "You've got guts, kid. That thing's older than me." But he didn't stop watching. The sound made him forget about his long, tiring day. More people started to gather again. The sound of rain and the soft piano notes mixed beautifully, echoing between the old buildings. A little boy holding an ice cream cone stopped and stared. A woman carrying groceries slowed her walk. Even the bus driver waiting for passengers turned off his engine to listen. The piano that everyone had ignored for years now pulled strangers together. Lena didn't realize what was happening. She was lost in her own small world. The melody she played wasn't perfect, but it had emotion. Every wrong note somehow sounded right when mixed with her heart. For her, it wasn't just music. It was memory. It was her mother's voice, hidden in the sound, whispering, "Don't be afraid, just play." The rain began to fall harder, but no one moved away. Umbrellas opened, but everyone stayed, watching the small girl play as water dripped from her sleeves. Her little fingers danced quickly now, her lips curved into a small smile. She didn't care about being wet. She didn't care that people were watching. She just wanted to keep the sound alive. Suddenly, one string snapped inside the piano. The sound cracked sharply. Lena stopped for a second, startled. A hush fell over the small crowd. But then she pressed another key, and another. She kept going, turning the broken note into part of the rhythm. The people smiled, impressed by her courage. Even broken things, she seemed to say, could still make music. One of the women watching took out her phone and started recording. Another joined her. Then another. Within minutes, several people were filming as Lena played through the rain. Her song rose and fell with emotion. Pure, fragile, and full of soul. When she finally stopped, her hands were trembling. Her shoes were soaked through. Her hair clung to her cheeks. But her eyes, they were bright and alive. The small crowd began to clap softly. Lena looked surprised. She had never been clapped for before. She smiled shyly and bowed her head, whispering a small, "Thank you." The man at the bus stop stood up. He took off his jacket and draped it over the piano. "To keep it dry," he said gruffly, pretending not to care. But everyone could see the small smile tugging at his lips. A woman left a small red flower on top of the piano before walking away. A boy gave Lena his umbrella, saying, "You need it more than me." That evening, when Lena went home, she didn't tell her father what had happened. He was still tired and quiet, sitting by the window like always, but she couldn't stop humming. Her fingers kept tapping the table like invisible piano keys. Something had awakened in her, a spark that no storm could wash away, and out in the market square, under the dim streetlights, the piano stood quietly, a jacket on its frame, a flower on its top, and a story already beginning to spread. The sound of rain tapped against its keys again, waiting for her to return, waiting for the next song. For the first time in years, the old square didn't feel forgotten anymore. It felt alive, all because a little girl dared to play in the rain. By the next morning, the video of the little girl playing the old piano had already begun to spread. It had been recorded by one of the women in the crowd. She posted it online with the caption, "A small girl with big courage." At first, only a few locals watched it, smiling and commenting that they had seen her with their own eyes. But within hours, the video reached hundreds, then thousands. People shared it across town, calling her the girl who played in the rain. Lena didn't know any of this. She woke up late that morning, the sound of rain still whispering outside her small window. Her school uniform hung near the heater, still damp from the day before. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and smelled the faint scent of tea from the kitchen. Her father was already gone to work, leaving a note on the table that read, "Be careful in the rain. Love you." She smiled faintly and took her small bag again. Her shoes were still a bit wet, but she didn't care. She wanted to see the piano. Not the people, not the crowd, just the piano. It felt like something special waited there, something only she could hear. When she reached the market square, she was shocked. There were already people standing around the piano, talking and pointing. Someone had cleaned the mud off the bricks around it, and the old vendor was there again, smiling as he waved her over. "You've become famous overnight, kid." He laughed. Lena blinked, confused. "Famous?" she asked. He took out his phone and showed her the video, her own face soaked in rain, fingers moving softly across the keys. She stared in silence, watching herself play, hearing the mix of rain and melody that had made everyone stop. She didn't understand why so many people cared, but seeing their smiles made her heart feel warm. A few people came up to her asking her name. "You're Lena, right? You play beautifully," one woman said. Another offered her a chocolate bar. "You made me cry yesterday." "Sweetheart." Lena didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to attention. She just smiled shyly and thanked them. Then she sat down again at the piano. The sound of chatter faded as soon as her fingers touched the keys. This time the song she played was slower, more emotional. The air was cool, and the drizzle began to fall again. People took out their umbrellas, forming a circle around her like a quiet audience. The moment felt magical. Even the wind seemed to pause to listen. She played a tune she had heard her mother hum before going to bed. It was soft and sad but filled with warmth. The melody carried across the market, through the sound of rain and the distant honking of cars. Some people closed their eyes. Some smiled. Some wiped their tears. An old woman whispered to her husband, "That piano hasn't sung like this in years." The man nodded. It took a child to remind us how it sounds. When Lena finished, there was silence for a few seconds, the kind that only happens when hearts are full. Then the applause came, soft but sincere. The vendor clapped the loudest, his rough hands echoing in the wet air. A reporter from the local news who had heard about the viral video appeared suddenly, camera in hand. He smiled kindly and asked, "Can I talk to you, little one?" Lena nodded nervously. The reporter crouched down beside her and asked, "Why do you play this piano every day?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Because my mom used to play and I miss her. When she was in the hospital, she said music can heal even when doctors can't." The crowd went quiet. Some people lowered their eyes, tears mixing with the rain. The reporter smiled gently, his voice trembling as he said, "That's beautiful, Lena. Truly beautiful." He recorded her short interview, and when it aired that evening, it wasn't just a story. It was a feeling. The story of a little girl who played a broken piano in the rain, not for fame but for love, spread far beyond their small town. Later that night, Lena returned home, unaware that her video was now being shared by people from other cities. A musician reposted it, calling her a reminder of why art matters. A teacher in another town played it for her students, saying, "Listen, this is what emotion sounds like." Meanwhile, in the quiet corner of the market, the piano stood under the moonlight, the raindrops glistening on its wood. It wasn't forgotten anymore. Every key that had once been silent now carried a story, a girl's love and a memory that refused to fade. And as Lena fell asleep, she dreamed of her mother sitting beside her again, smiling, whispering, "You're making the world listen, my little girl." The rain outside her window tapped gently like piano notes, as if the sky itself was clapping for her. The next day, the sky was finally clear. For the first time in a week, no rain fell on the small town. The sun broke through the clouds, lighting up puddles like mirrors, and the market square looked cleaner than usual. The old piano stood under its patchy roof, the vendor's jacket still draped over it like a loyal friend. But what surprised everyone that morning was the small bunch of flowers placed on top, tied with a pink ribbon and a note that read, For the girl who made the world stop and listen, Lena arrived just after school. Her uniform was dry today and her shoes didn't squish with every step. She had seen herself on television the night before. Her face, her music, her mother's song. It felt strange, almost unreal. Her father had sat beside her in silence, his eyes moist though he didn't say a word. When the reporter mentioned her mother, Lena saw him quietly close his eyes, as if he could hear that music again too. Now standing in front of the piano, Lena felt a mix of pride and sadness. She placed her small hand over the flowers, smiling softly. Around her, people were beginning to gather again, not out of curiosity, but out of respect. Play something, Lena, the corn vendor said kindly. It feels too quiet without your music, Lena nodded. But before she touched the keys, she closed her eyes. She remembered the hospital room, the beeping machines, and her mother's weak smile. Her mother's hand had been cold. But she had squeezed Lena's and whispered, "Promise me you'll never stop playing, even when it rains." Those words had lived in her heart ever since. She took a deep breath and began to play. The melody started soft, almost like a whisper. Each note floated into the open air like sunlight through glass. The people around her didn't move, didn't speak. They just listened. Even the wind seemed to hush. The song was new, one she had made herself. Inspired by the rain, it told a story of sadness, love, and strength. Her fingers moved faster. Her face glowed with emotion. For a moment, she wasn't just a little girl anymore. She was a storyteller. Her music spoke for everyone who had ever lost someone, for everyone who still remembered a voice that had gone silent. When she reached the final note, she looked up and saw tears in people's eyes. The vendor was wiping his face with a towel, pretending it was rain. A mother hugged her son tightly, and even the old man sitting at the bus stop whispered, "Bless that child." After she finished, an older woman with a cane approached her. Her eyes were gentle, filled with memories. "That song, I know it," the woman said. "My husband used to play something just like it." She placed a small pendant in Lena's hand, a silver charm shaped like a treble clef. "For you, little pianist," she said softly. "Keep playing for all of us who can't anymore." Lena's eyes widened. "Thank you," she whispered. Clutching it tightly, the crowd applauded again, this time louder, not because it was a show, but because they felt part of something pure. Later that evening, another man came to the piano, a stranger with gray hair and kind eyes. He introduced himself as Mr. Allen, a retired music teacher. He had seen the viral video too and had traveled from a nearby city just to meet her. "You played that piece beautifully," he told her. "You have a rare gift, Lena, one that comes from the heart." He asked if she wanted to learn more about music, maybe take lessons. Lena looked uncertain. "I can't pay," she said quietly, looking down. But the man smiled and shook his head. "You've already paid with what you gave to the world. Hope." He promised to visit every weekend to teach her for free. The vendor clapped his hands in joy. "Looks like our little star's going to shine brighter," he said. Everyone cheered softly, the sound filling the square with warmth. That night, when Lena walked home, she held the pendant close to her chest. The piano's sound still echoed in her ears. She felt her mother's presence in every note, and when she reached home, her father hugged her tightly for the first time in months. "You made her proud," he whispered. His voice shaking, Lena didn't need to ask who he meant. She knew, and outside under the moonlight, the piano waited for her return. A place once forgotten now glowed with meaning. It had become a shrine of music, love, and healing. And it all began with one little girl who chose to play in the rain. The following week brought a kind of excitement the little town hadn't felt in years. The story of the girl who played in the rain had spread beyond the local community. Newspapers wrote about her, television anchors mentioned her name, and online posts carried millions of views. But Lena, unaware of the scale of her fame, continued to walk to the same square every afternoon, her school bag bouncing at her side and her heart filled with music. That Monday she arrived to find something different. The piano wasn't alone anymore. The mayor himself stood there with a few workers. They had covered the ground with wooden planks to stop it from sinking into the mud, and a new canopy was being built above it. The vendor waved her over, grinning. "Look, kiddo, you're getting your own stage." Lena blinked in surprise. "Stage?" she asked softly. One of the workers smiled. "Well, kind of. We're fixing this place so you and this old piano don't have to get drenched every time it rains." The crowd that had gathered laughed warmly. She looked at the piano and ran her hand across the keys. "Thank you," she whispered. She wasn't thanking the workers or the mayor. She was thanking the piano itself. It had brought her back to her mother's memory, and now somehow it was changing her whole town. When she began to play that day, the sound was brighter. The piano, though still old and worn, seemed to sing louder than before. Each note reached the farthest corners of the square. Children stopped chasing each other. Adults paused mid-conversation. And for a few beautiful minutes, time felt slower. A news crew arrived. Setting up cameras, a reporter introduced herself, saying they wanted to do a special follow-up on the young pianist. Lena hesitated at first. She was shy, not used to attention, but when she sat down to play again, all her nervousness melted away. Her fingers glided over the keys with the same soft confidence her mother once had. After she finished, the reporter asked gently, "What makes you come back to this piano every day?" Lena smiled shyly. "It feels like my mom is here when I play. Like she's listening somewhere," she said. "The rain doesn't scare me anymore. It feels like it's clapping along." The words were simple, but they touched everyone listening. The reporter had to blink away tears before continuing. That night, the interview aired on national television. Viewers from all over the country saw the little girl with the soft brown hair and big honest eyes, sitting at a broken piano under a makeshift roof. The clip of her saying, "The rain doesn't scare me, it claps along," became one of the most shared moments online. Messages poured into the town's community page. People offering to restore the piano properly, music stores offering free lessons, and one anonymous donor even promising a brand new piano for Lena. But she didn't care about gifts. All she wanted was to keep the old piano alive because it was part of her story. A few days later, Mr. Allen, the retired music teacher, returned with a notebook in his hand. "We're going to start proper lessons," he told her. He opened the book and began teaching her how to read sheet music. "You have natural talent, Lena," he said proudly. "But imagine what you'll do once you learn the language of music itself." She listened carefully, her small hands tracing the notes on paper, and when she tried them on the piano, her face lit up. "It sounds the same," she said in wonder. Mr. Allen smiled. "No, my dear, it sounds better. Because now you understand it." Every afternoon, more and more people gathered to watch. Some brought flowers, some brought candles, and some just stood quietly, letting the music heal something invisible inside them. Even those who never cared for music before began to wait for her next visit. The market square had turned into a place of peace. Lena's father visited one evening too, standing at the edge of the crowd. He didn't step forward, just watched silently. The way she moved, the way she smiled, the way her music lifted people. It reminded him of his wife. For the first time since her passing, he felt something warm spread through his chest. Hope. When Lena noticed him, she didn't stop playing. She simply smiled at him through the melody. It was their first real conversation in months. No words, just music. As the sun set and the lights flickered on, Mr. Allen whispered to the vendor, "You know, I've taught for 30 years, and I've never seen something like this." The vendor nodded, eyes glistening. "She's not just playing the piano, she's playing people's hearts." That night, as Lena walked home, the sounds of applause still echoed behind her. She looked up at the clear sky and whispered, "I kept my promise, Mama." The stars twinkled faintly, and somewhere in the cool night breeze she could almost hear her mother's voice saying, "I know, my little pianist, I know." The next morning began quietly. The rain clouds had returned, soft and gray, spreading across the sky like a sleepy blanket. Lena woke to the faint sound of thunder in the distance. She didn't mind. She had learned to love the rain now. It had once been a symbol of sadness, but ever since that day with the piano, it felt like music itself. She packed her bag, tucked her pendant safely under her collar, and ran out before her father could remind her to take an umbrella. When she reached the market square, she stopped in surprise. There was a crowd, a much bigger one than before. Cars lined the street. People with cameras were setting up tripods, and a few musicians she didn't recognize were tuning their instruments nearby. The vendor spotted her and called out, "Lena, you're famous now. They're here for you." She blinked, confused. "For me?" A man in a black coat approached her, smiling. "We're organizing a small concert today, and right here by your piano, we want you to open the show." Her eyes widened. "Me? But I've never played for so many people before." The man laughed gently. "You already have. Every time you played, remember? You just didn't know how big your audience was. Lena's heart began to race. But she nodded shyly. Mr. Allen soon arrived, his notebook under his arm. I was hoping you'd say yes, he said. You'll do wonderfully. As the workers prepared the area, people kept arriving, families, students, shopkeepers, and even tourists from nearby towns. The old piano stood proudly under its new canopy, polished and fixed just enough to shine. Someone had even placed fairy lights around it, twinkling softly like stars. When it was finally time, the mayor stepped up to the microphone. This little girl reminded us what music really means, he said. Her heart turned this forgotten square into a place of hope. The crowd clapped, cheering her name. Lena! Lena! She felt her hands trembling, her breath short. She looked at Mr. Allen, who whispered, Just play what you feel. She nodded and took a deep breath. Then she sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and began. The first note rang out like a drop of light in the gray air. Followed by another, the rain began to fall, softly at first. As if it was waiting for her cue, the crowd held their breath. Umbrellas opening, but no one moving. Her fingers moved faster now, telling a story only her heart understood. It was the same melody she had played the day her mother said goodbye, but now it sounded different, fuller, stronger. Each note carried something deeper. It wasn't sadness anymore, it was transformation. The piano, once broken and silent, now roared with life. The sound blended with the rain and the soft humming of the crowd. It felt as if the whole town was breathing through her music. Halfway through, a gust of wind blew in, scattering the raindrops and making the fairy lights flicker. But Lena didn't stop. Her hair clung to her face, her fingers slick with water. Yet she played harder, fiercer. Her pendant glimmered faintly under the gray light, and then something extraordinary happened. An older man stepped from the crowd. His face looked familiar to the vendor. He wore a worn-out coat and held a hat over his heart. When Lena finished her song, he approached the piano slowly. The crowd parting for him. Excuse me, he said softly. Was this piano once kept in a small church on Bell Street? Mr. Allen's eyes widened. Yes, many years ago, I think so. The man smiled sadly. It belonged to my wife. She played it every Sunday. We lost it when the church closed after her passing. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at Lena. That song you just played, it was her favorite. The square went silent. The rain fell softly around them. Lena looked at him with wide, kind eyes. I didn't know, she whispered. I just played what I felt. The man nodded slowly, smiling through his tears. Then maybe she sent you, child. Maybe you're the reason her music found its way home again. The crowd clapped, not just politely, but emotionally. People cried, hugged, and whispered prayers. The old man placed his hand gently on the piano and said, Thank you for bringing her back to me. Lena stood quietly beside him. Then she did something simple but beautiful. She moved over and said, Would you like to play? The old man hesitated, then sat down. His fingers trembled as he touched the keys, but the sound that came out was pure and soft. He played a few lines of his late wife's song, and when he stopped, Lena joined him. Together they played on old and young, past and present, memory and hope. Two hearts sharing the same song in the same rain. When they finished, the applause was thunderous. The sound of clapping mixed with the rain, echoing through the streets that night. Videos of their duet went viral again. The title read, The Little Girl and the Widower, a song that brought back love, and somewhere, far above the clouds maybe, just maybe, a gentle spirit smiled listening to her piano play once more. The following afternoon, the town buzzed with a quiet excitement that only Lena seemed unaware of. Word of her piano performance had spread to nearby schools, music clubs, and even city newspapers. But for Lena, it was just another rainy day. Perfect for playing, perfect for remembering, perfect for the piano that had become her secret friend. She arrived at the square early, before the crowd could gather. The old piano stood waiting under its protective canopy, the fairy lights still twinkling faintly. Water droplets clung to the edges of the wood like tiny crystals. She knelt down and ran her fingers along the keys, smiling softly, remembering how this piano had once been forgotten, how now it had become a place of connection, of healing. By the time she began to play, a small crowd had already formed, people murmuring softly in anticipation. Some carried umbrellas, some simply stood in the drizzle. Their eyes were wide, ready to witness what they already knew would be something special. The first notes fell into the morning air gently. As she played, Lena noticed something unusual. A little boy, no older than 6, standing at the edge of the crowd, staring at her with wide, curious eyes. He clutched a worn teddy bear in one hand, his mother holding the other. Yet he didn't move, as if the music had frozen him in place. Her fingers danced over the keys, her melody richer and more expressive than before. It was no longer just a song for herself or her mother. It was for everyone who had come to hear it, for the people who had lost someone, for those who carried sadness in their hearts, for those who didn't know how to smile that day. Her music was a gift she didn't even realize she was giving. As the song progressed, the little boy began to hum quietly, unsure, but his voice matched the gentle rhythm of Lena's fingers. His mother smiled and wiped a tear from her cheek. She whispered softly, "He hasn't done that in months." The vendor nearby nodded. Music can do that, remind people how to feel. Suddenly, a man with a violin stepped into the square. Drawn by the melody, he introduced himself as Mr. Ramirez. "A local music teacher, mind if I join?" he asked. His eyes twinkled, his presence calm and encouraging. Lena hesitated for a moment but then nodded, and together, the piano and violin sang in harmony, weaving a beautiful duet. Blending Lena's innocence with his experience, people gathered closer, forming a circle, their faces lit with wonder, some smiling, some crying. It was no longer just a little girl playing a piano. It was a community being reminded of the beauty in simple things, of courage, of hope, of memory. Halfway through the song, Lena's eyes wandered to the sky. The clouds parted slightly, letting streaks of sunlight fall onto the piano, illuminating the keys as if the world itself was shining down on her. The fairy lights reflected softly on the polished wood, creating a magical glow. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath, falling in tiny droplets that sparkled in the light. When the last note faded, the square was silent for a heartbeat. Then applause erupted, gentle at first, then louder, until it filled the air like rolling thunder. The little boy clapped vigorously, the vendor cheered, and the musicians in the crowd lifted their instruments in appreciation. Mr. Ramirez knelt beside Lena, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You have a gift, Lena. A rare gift," he said softly. "But remember, it's not just the notes you play, it's the love in your heart that makes them powerful." Lena smiled. Feeling warmth fill her chest, she looked around at the crowd, at the little boy, at her piano, and nodded silently. From that day forward, Lena became the heart of the market square, playing whenever she could, drawing people not for fame or attention, but for the connection her music created. Families came, friends came, strangers came, all for the girl who reminded them that even a broken piano and a rainy day could create something beautiful. As the sun set and the crowd dispersed, Lena lingered a little longer, pressing her fingers gently on the keys, her melody soft and sweet, carrying into the quiet night. The little boy waved goodbye, his teddy bear tucked under his arm. The vendor nodded. Mr. Ramirez promised to return next week with more music. And somewhere, as the lights flickered and the rain whispered, the piano, once abandoned, once forgotten, seemed to hum with joy, knowing that through Lena's hands, its song would never be silenced again. The town had learned something vital that day, that hope, love, and music could appear in the most unexpected places, if only someone brave enough played the first note. The weeks that followed felt like magic in the small town. The market square, once quiet and forgotten, had transformed into a place of gathering, laughter, and music. People came from nearby towns just to see Lena play her piano. The once abandoned instrument now stood proudly under its sturdy canopy, fairy lights twinkling softly even in the fading light. The rain no longer seemed like an obstacle. It had become part of the music itself. Dancing along with each note, Lena arrived one rainy afternoon, her small shoes squelching in the puddles, but she didn't mind. She had grown used to the sound of rain blending with her music. In her hand, she held the silver treble clef pendant, a gift from the woman who had first come to her after she played for the crowd. Lena smiled faintly, feeling her mother's presence with every step. When she reached the piano, a few familiar faces were already there, waiting. The little boy from before stood holding his teddy bear, now humming along with her softly. Other children arrived, carrying small instruments, tambourines, flutes, even a tiny drum. Lena's eyes widened. "You want to play with me?" she asked. The children nodded eagerly, and Mr. Allen, her teacher, stepped forward. Carrying sheet music he had prepared for a small ensemble. "Let's make this a real concert," he said, smiling. His eyes twinkled with pride. Watching Lena take the lead, she sat at the piano, her fingers brushing the keys lightly, testing the sound. Then she began to play a new melody, one she had composed herself, soft at first, then growing bolder. The children joined in with their instruments, their notes blending clumsily at first, then beautifully as Lena guided them. Her music had become a story, not just of sadness, but of courage, hope, and community. The crowd grew as the notes floated across the square. Adults stopped their errands. Parents called their children closer. Some of the older townsfolk even wiped tears from their eyes, remembering long-lost friends or loved ones. A sense of peace settled over the square, as if the music had healed invisible wounds. Then, in the midst of the melody, a man approached slowly, his eyes wide with recognition. It was the old widower whose wife had once owned the piano, the one whose favorite song Lena had unknowingly played for him. He knelt beside her and whispered, "Your music brought her back to me, just for a moment." Lena smiled softly, placing her small hand over his. "I'm glad," she said. "That's why I play, so people can feel what I feel inside." As the song reached its final note, a hush fell over the crowd. The rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, dripping from the canopy above. Lena lifted her head, and for the first time, she saw how many people had gathered. Dozens, maybe even hundreds, all watching her, all listening, all feeling. Then applause erupted, soft at first, then rolling and loud, echoing against the buildings, clapping not for skill or fame, but for the heart behind the music. The little boy clapped so hard his teddy bear fell, and the children who had played alongside Lena cheered wildly. Mr. Allen clapped and smiled, proud beyond words. Someone in the crowd began recording, and soon, just like before, the video spread far beyond the small town. But Lena didn't notice. She didn't care about views or likes. She only knew that the piano, once abandoned, once silent, and had finally found its voice. And through it she had found hers too. Later that evening, as Lena walked home through the quiet streets, her shoes wet and her hair clinging to her cheeks, her father waiting with a warm coat, she felt something she had never felt before. Complete peace. The square behind her glowed softly with the fairy lights. The piano resting proudly, ready for the next song, the next story. She looked up at the clouds, whispering softly, "Thank you, Mama." And for a moment she imagined her mother smiling down at her, listening to every note, feeling every heartbeat, knowing that even in absence love could still be heard. From that day on, Lena continued to play. Every rainy afternoon, every sunny evening. Each performance bringing people together, creating memories, and reminding everyone that even forgotten thing, a broken piano, a small girl, a rainy street corner, could become the most important part of life. And the piano, once left to the shadows, now stood as a symbol of hope, resilience, and the magic that can happen when a small heart dares to play. And in the town's memory, the little girl who played in the rain became more than a story. She became a living melody that would never be forgotten.